to talk about CakePHP, obviously. More specifically, the future. And since the future is very big and the past is finite, whereas the future is potentially limitless, we have a lot to get through. So that's right. So who am I? Well, some facts about me. My name is Nate. I am a lead developer of CakePHP, and I've got a serial number. Yes, so I've engaged for 4 years. Don't clap, don't clap. And so yes, I'm broke as a result of donations that will be accepted at the end of the talk.
Can we clap now?
Sorry?
Can we clap now?
No. Clap at the end. All right, so what's the point? All right, just be patient, I'm getting there. All right, so not too long ago I asked a question of the CakePHP community, so you guys, that sounded a bit like this. What do you hate about CakePHP? And since it's human nature to like to complain, I got a lot of feedback. But that's okay, because complaining combined with action is progress. So progress is good. Right, so is that what people said? What do you think?
Yeah.
Yeah, was that the biggest complaint? No. What do you think the biggest complaint was? Anybody?
Too little documentation?
No, actually.
Next.
Anybody? Anybody?
Come on.
Yes.
The overhead?
The overhead, no.
So you guys need to read the
Yes.
CakePHP.
Correct. CakePHP is the biggest complaint that we have going right now. So, as we learned from Garrett yesterday, we're getting rid of that. So there goes that problem. But that was just one of them. And sorry? Oh.
Oh, no, that was actually, that is a problem.
Right. So we're getting rid of that one. But there were plenty others, and so we're going to go through those just as soon as I take a break. Right. So yes, there were some other issues that people mentioned repeatedly. The core classes are too tightly coupled. You might have experience with this with interacting between models and form helper, or other hard-coded class dependencies. You can extend helpers without changing all your view code. So if you extend, HTML helper to my HTML helper, you have to go search and replace, which search and replace isn't that hard, but with extensible code, you shouldn't have to do that. It's hard to organize large applications, and there are ways around that in the system file loading that we have right now. But still, there aren't really still very good conventions for how to do that, and the conventions that exist sometimes conflict with other things. There's no full console support. The CakePHP console doesn't give you full access to actually writing PHP in the command line. So among other issues, that's one of them. The admin routing is inflexible. Usually, without doing some custom work, there's only kind of one way to set up admin routing, and there's only one setting that you can either switch on or off. So that's a limited use, and there are ways around it, but whatever. So callback support. Callback support is only available in certain classes, models, controllers, helpers, and there are only very specific points at which you can intercept the request cycle as CakePHP goes through and processes things. And actually we'll see how that plays out in a later criticism. And file collisions due to lack of namespacing or lack of prefixing classes with, cake underscore whatever. Personally, I hate prefixing classes. I do not like it. It is ugly. It disturbs my sensibilities. I do not like to code when my sensibilities are disturbed. Plugin support. Plugin support has actually come a long way, particularly in 1.3, as Garrett probably mentioned. Well, I was thinking, yes. Sorry. So no custom routing or bootstrapping. If you want to have any initialization code or routing code, it either has to be included manually or you have to do it within your application itself. Either way, there's just no automatic support for that. And again, this has been fixed a little bit, but still not completely. You can really only share basic classes like controllers, models, helpers, views, static assets, so on and so forth. So it's a lot of stuff, and generally speaking, it's most of what you would want to include in a plugin that you would include in your application. I don't know why you include a plugin in anything else, but just covering the basis. But still, there are some gaps in the support there. No versioning or dependencies. This isn't really specific to plugins itself, but it's a problem we have yet to solve. And I believe there are some things we could do to make said problem solving easier. And model support. Model support, again, gets its own special category of complaints because there were so many of them. Save all. Save all is kind of limited in its capacity to recurse through model relationships. And this has mainly, I would say, to do with the fact that we use arrays instead of objects. Again, limited flexibility and fine recursion. This is taken care of to an extent with containable, but for example, things that could be left joined aren't, because I tried to do it and it involves basically re-architecting DBO source yet again, which I would rather not do. Limited denormalization support. For those of you who were here for the workshop, we saw a quick demo of counter cache. Counter cache for has many associations is really the only denormalization support in the core. Again, sometimes difficult to implement due to the lack of object support for records. And no advanced querying support, subqueries, for example. There's a lot of custom stuff you can do with joins within the existing code as it is now, but there's no explicit support for subqueries or different things like that, which oftentimes is fine. Like there are plenty of times where you just don't need it, or you can get by with something else that's just as efficient. But in the cases where you do, it's really nice to have. No composite primary key support. So we've kind of gone back and forth on this quite a bit, but I guess kind of my conclusion is that it should be extensible enough to support that, even if it means you having to do a lot of extra work. So that's kind of my position on that. Excuse me. Right. And no composite display field support. This is arguably far more useful than primary key support, so that's why I put it after. And finally, again, with the callbacks, you can't get them on relations. You could, and we considered implementing this, but it actually causes a great deal of overhead, and overhead is bad when you don't need it. I think there's a patch that doesn't work completely. If anyone's interested in working on this, talk. And finally, no support for model results as objects. It's just a big thorn in my side, as I'm sure it is many of you. Now, that's not to say that arrays don't have their place for the time. But the duration of time which we were maintaining compatibility with PHP 4 is a very useful thing to have. But since we're dropping that, I think it's about time to drop this too. Thoughts, feedback, yes, no?
Yes.
All right, so I'm hearing a yes. Thanks for that, Dennis. Nice to know at least one person's with me. Other stuff, other miscellaneous complaints. Oh my gosh, what about performance? Performance, everyone harps on the performance, the hello world benchmarks, the comparisons, the graphing, and so on and so forth. It's a framework, it's a general framework. It's not going to be as fast as writing every line of code custom tailored to your application, but that's not the point. But everybody continues to harp on it anyway. So fine, I will respond. And does it do the thing with the scaling? Does it scale? Does it have the scalability? Okay, yes, no, maybe, I don't know. Will it blend? This is a picture of a kitten in a blender. Will it blend? You sick people! What is wrong with you? You dare ask such a question? Seriously? So, as long as you don't have a propensity for blending kittens, I have good news, and yes, even Cindy will like it. I just saved a bunch of money on my car insurance. That's what you think I could. Wrong, if that was your answer. No, actually, all right. So what is it? Yeah.
The Geicos.
Right.
We're not being sponsored by Geico.
No.
We're sponsored by Geico.
We're not sponsored by that Geico, full disclosure. All right, so, all right, everybody ready for the big news? I've been hinting at it, talking about it for a very long time. Are you ready to see what it is? Yes, no, maybe, I don't know. Can you repeat the question?
Just don't blend the cake. Just don't blend the cake.
Yes?
Yes.
Yep, I get an amen. All right. Isn't it awesome? Isn't it awesome? Isn't it like the most beautiful thing that you've ever seen? Oh, I'll show you around inside. How about that? Take a look. What do you think? Isn't it cool? Isn't it great? I like it.
With those weird backslashes. Yeah.
We'll get to that in a second. All right. Yeah. So we also have forward slashes too. Those are nice for separating file paths. So we've got kind of an even distribution of backslashes overall from forward slashes, and so on. Yes, that's actually the first line of the file is that, and you read it right. What's that? Okay. All right. So wait, hold on. Back it up. What's going on? So it's the CakePHP core, completely gutted and re-architected, and rewritten for PHP 5.3 compatibility. You can clap now. Right, so what does this whole new thing look like? Well, thank you for asking. Why don't I show you? All right, so for reference, old core. Right. So there's a lot of stuff there. Okay, and new core. Once again, just to compare and contrast. Old core. And new core. Nice, yeah, nice packages. So, what we got here, we've got some dependency hierarchy. So, core and util are the two kind of base packages of the entire framework. Everything else kind of just stems from them, and organizing things into packages actually makes it really, really easy to manage dependencies. We've kind of broken everything apart and put it back together more neatly. So really, yes, the entire framework only depends on those two packages, and other packages depend on other packages than those, but we kept the dependencies kind of really tight, which is cool for reasons you'll see later. One of them being that you can actually take these packages and just extract out their dependencies and use those in non-Cake applications, which is pretty cool, right? I mean, you've never been able to do that before. And namespaces. Namespaces are friggin' awesome. I tell you what. Oh, right, namespaces, by the way. Did I mention that we're using them? So that's good. So yes, no more collisions. You can now have a model named file. Can I get an amen? Yeah. Oh, and plugin architecture, stupid simple. Namespace slide, separate everything, you just drop a plugin right in there and go to town. In fact, this kind of evens everything out as far as the hierarchy between your application, Cake core, and your plugins. So I know a lot of people, there's kind of a perception that there's a high barrier to actually writing plugins and versus just keeping everything in your application. And we're going to see a little bit later on why that's not the case. Right now, for example. Okay, so here's an example of a file in core. Can you guys all read that? Okay. Great. So in blue we have a class name, and in green we have the fully namespaced file name that that class name maps to. As you can see, they're pretty similar, kind of following a little pattern there. So an equivalent example within your application would look kind of like that, except it's a model instead of a cache adapter. So again, we have a very similar, familiar pattern. Interesting. Let's see where we're going here. And finally, a plugin. So plugins actually look a little bit different, but the new plugin structure actually exactly mirrors your application. So it's almost like an application is a plugin. A plugin is an application. Whoa, that's deep. So again, pattern is very similar. And you can actually change these out, and we'll see how. So yeah, that was weird, right? Like we were including a cache adapter in a plugin. That's never happened before. So wait, why is this happening? What does this mean? Yeah, you actually can do that. So yeah, I mean, if it can, everything is equivalent. So if it can go anywhere, it can go everywhere. In a plugin. All right, so hold on. So these namespaces, they're really, really long. It's almost as bad as those prefixing classes, which I loathe. So why am I using this? Well, thanks for asking, I'll tell you. No, you don't have to do it. Well, do you? Kind of, it depends, maybe. Usually no. So usually no is what we care about. So, all right, how does this actually work? Let's say you're importing specific classes. The typical use case for this would be you want to use a model in a controller. You know exactly what the model is named and where to look for it. You're never going to load a model where you, for example, won't know where it is if it's maybe in your application or maybe in a plugin. That's pretty unusual. So this is how you would import a model class into your controller. And then this is how you use it. Pretty simple. So once you import the class, you can call it just like you would any other PHP class. And again, same thing. Post. Yeah. Beyond. So then there's the more dynamic type where, for example, with the caching adapters we saw previously, we could have caching adapters coming from all kinds of different places. We could have, we have the base ones in the core, we have ones that are specific to our application, maybe we have ones packaged in a plugin. So how does that all kind of fit together? Well, let's see here. So we have this libraries class and it has a locate method. And locate knows about different types of files. So let's say you want to find a cache adapter called APC. It's going to look in all those places. So first it looks at your application to see if there's an APC adapter there. Then notice the plugin path mirroring the application path because, again, they are the same. And finally, we're falling back to the core. So actually, the system that it's using for doing this is based on an idea of path templates, and it's completely customizable. So you can actually add your own paths per type, which is amazingly more efficient than anything we were doing previously. All right, so whoa, hold on. What is with this libraries and use stuff? Where's my friendly, familiar app import? Because everybody loves app import, right? No. So we have a new kind of system for class loading. So the use statement, as you saw, was for static stuff, the stuff that's always kind of coming from the same place. Whereas libraries class kind of knows about your application, knows about plugins, it knows about the core, and it can kind of find things for you. And by the way, to address that previous concern about things being too tied together, most core dependencies are actually completely dynamic, which means you can replace them anytime, all the time, on time. So whatever way you go, because of the magic of PHP 5 auto-loading, no class is ever loaded until you actually want to do something with it. Which is very, very nice. It's really remote. Okay, so yeah, this means everything's going to be faster. We're going to have our performance and our scalability, right? Let's find out. All right, so simple hello world for whatever that's worth. All right, so here's actually what basic hello world in new core kind of looks like. So we're, you can see we're declaring a namespace, and then our class extends our base class, and then this is all pretty familiar stuff, right? Like everything else kind of looks pretty similar. So you can see where we're going with this. And then the view file is just going to be that. So we're just echoing out our message controller just to demonstrate our MVC goodness. So that actually runs at 62.5% of PHP's raw speed on my Tyrol MacBook. But it's running Siege with 50 concurrent users. So if you run it on your machine, your percentage difference should be kind of similar, give or take. I've actually done a lot of benchmarking since I started this on various different machines, and it's all come out pretty close. So we'll be doing more of that. But this was run, without APC, without caching, without any optimizations of any kind whatsoever. So that's kind of interesting. So in other words, that's basically the equivalent of running die hello world 1.6 times. So it's kind of fast. But let's just say, it's not fast enough. You need more speed for whatever reason, right? So slice. Let's take a look. What is slice? It's a plugin that runs on the new core, and that's right. Oh, there it is. Slice. That's how you load plugins. It's very rather efficient, I'd like to think. And yes, you just heard about this a few minutes ago, and there are already plugins for it. Not many, but they exist. So, going back to our index.php. This is what an implementation of Slice looks like, and you can stick that right in index.php right along with your the rest of your normal application. And this is Hello World in Slice. So as you can see, we are importing the Slice dispatcher and actually calling run on it and giving it this little thing, which, does anybody know what that thing after the get hello world is? Sorry? That is an anonymous function, aka closure, aka lambda, even though they technically mean different things, but I'll leave that to Joel, because, yeah, he's smart. So that's a route, basically, a really simple route mapped to a closure that's doing our hello world. So it's kind of interesting, right? So this actually runs at basically 2 times as fast, or 2 times faster rather than the normal core dispatch cycle that we just saw was already really fast. So that's kind of cool, right? Like, and you can use it just right in line with your normal application. So let's say you have a service that you're polling every 20 seconds, depending on your number of users. That's potentially a whole lot of requests. So using something like Slice to implement that service within your application is going to be really, really efficient. Or you could write it in C, you know, one of the two. And it's freaking cool. I mean, that was kind of cool, right? Like, you could do that in PHP. I never thought I'd see the day. Just saying. Right. So we saw that Slice, a plugin, was extending the dispatcher. And all my time of working with CakePHP, I've never extended the dispatcher, let alone in a plugin. So, yeah, the new core is like really, really extensible. It's really easy to do that kind of stuff. So this, for example. So old core, we've got our validation class. We've got you know, standard validations. They're kind of hard coded in there. You can't really do much with them except passing custom regular expressions on a case-by-case basis, right? So you know, that's great and all. It's useful for what it does, right? But okay, so in the new core, on the other hand, you can do this. You can actually add custom validation rules, and we see that a simple regular expression validator evaluates that to true. We're just calling the rule, but that also evaluates to true. Pretty cool. And also, that works too if you actually use your own custom code that's, you know, goes beyond a simple regular expression. Garrett, you should be paying attention to this one. Oh!
Walk master. Yeah.
So yeah, that's just one set of improvements that we made before. So that stuff's really extensible, right? But we've all heard talk from frameworks that claim that they're really extensible, and they're usually associated with some things that we don't like, such as this. Class names that go on forever. That's bad. Dependencies that are 20 classes deep, like having to import 20 classes just to use an RSS parser, for example. Not naming any names. And abstract factories. If you don't know this, just Google Hammer Factory, and you will be entertained for a little while anyway. Don't do it now. I'm speaking. I'm kidding, you can do it if you want. So yeah, actually, as it turns out, funny story, extensibility is a lot of consequence of well-designed software. So conventions are great and everything, but every once in a while you do need to break out of it, and your software should not restrict you, or rather it should not restrict you to an extent that is unhealthy, let's say. So, for example, things like extending the dispatcher. When you really need it for extra speed, you should be able to do that. And so is reusability. Who'd have thunk? It's kind of weird, right? So, going back to the packages, you remember those? They were all in those little folders and they're sprawled out all over the place. It's kind of nice, huh? The new core can actually be bootstrapped in one line of PHP code from any file, whether it's responding to an HTTP request via Apache or Lightning or so on and so forth, or whether you're calling in the command line. And we actually make use of that quite extensively. So it's cool. But wait, there's more. PHP standards, right? So earlier this year, I attended PHP Tech, and as it happened, presidents and leads and major community members of things like Zero Framework and Spain and Solar PHP and Pear and Nagati, we all happened to be there. So this guy, his name is Travis Weisgood, he's a friend of mine, he decided it would be a good idea to round us all up and make us talk to each other. Which, as it happened, wasn't that hard because we're all pretty nice guys. I mean, okay, maybe I'm not that nice of a guy, but the rest of the guys are pretty nice. I enjoyed the company. And as it happened, we were all actually able to agree on things. Like, that's weird. But But basically, by making a few changes to how classes and files are named, and it really just had to do with like uppercasing and lowercasing. So really, it's like bike shed stuff. Just changing some of that stuff, not only would we be able to swap classes back and forth, meaning you can use Zen framework classes natively in the new core, or core classes in Zen, or potentially Symfony, pair, and well, pair 2, I should say. So not only that, but a patch has actually been written against SPL. I don't even know what SPL is. Yes? No? Maybe? Okay. Couple. SPL is a standard PHP library. It's the thing with the iterators. If we were playing the iterator drinking game, you would be taking 3 shots right now.
But it's not.
Right, that would be seriously unhealthy on many levels. So a patch has been written for SPL that actually changes, or would change, how the default auto-loading in PHP 5 would work, so that none of these frameworks would have to write their own loaders anymore, because they would all work the same, which means all your file loading goes down to the C level, which means it's really freaking fast, which is yet another good thing.
Hot. Really hot.
It's really hot. Alright, so if this code all looks really different, how am I going to migrate my applications? Well, let's find out. I don't know. So, alright, so this is pretty standard, regular, not old school, but we'll say current school, CakePHP, right? So the equivalent of this actually might look something like that. So it's a little bit different, right? Like you've got 2 extra lines at the top of the file. The first one is declaring where this class is in the hierarchy. The second one is obviously declaring, as we saw, what the class is going to use. But other than the new base class, the rest of the stuff is not that difficult. Like we're going from materialized objects to statics, which is kind of nice, right? And then instead of actually having to set stuff, we can just return an array from our action. Like, that makes sense, you know? And it just goes to the view like normal. Alright, so what about that? So, you know, you have to type post, title, and then wrap it in the H to make sure it gets escaped properly and so on. It's kind of a lot of typing. Like a lot of typing. So we were actually able to get that down to that, but hold on a second. We're doing like escaping here, right? And it doesn't look like we're doing escaping here. And we're using short tags. And what's the deal? What's going on? That's bad. That's evil. Like the fruits of the devil. Streams. The answer is PHP streams. By including files through PHP streams, you can actually rewrite them. It's kind of fast. So what we're able to do is rewrite short tags to full PHP echo statements and automatically wrap them in output escaping. How cool is that? You clap. Oh, also, the filter system. So the new core is actually riddled with this filter system. It's an intercept filter pattern. It's kind of like callbacks. Crack. It's very fun. So we saw the dispatcher object, right? And both the slice dispatcher and regular dispatcher, they both have this run method that you use to like kick things off. So here is what a filter looks like. This is in a new file that goes in your config called switchboard.php, which allows you to wire up classes that don't normally talk to each other and make them get along. So now here we're saying it's a technique for lazy loading that says, okay, we're going to query the router class and ask it for all the routes. And if there aren't any, we're going to include routes.php. So what's happening here is we're actually saying, okay, before this run method happens, like before we do anything here, we're just gonna make sure the routes are loaded. And like, that's kind of cool, right? Like you're doing things lazily with this filter system, except you don't have to write any callbacks. So this is kind of weird syntax here. So you're getting 3 parameters. Self is either going to be a string or an object, depending on whether you are applying the filter to a static class or a materialized object. Params are, you actually get an associative array of all parameters that that method gets. And you get chain, which is actually the chain of all the filters that are applied to that method. So calling chain next with all those parameters actually calls the next filter in the chain all the way down to the method itself. And all the way back up again. So you could actually set the value of chain next to a local variable, modify that variable, and then return that. So doesn't that just like kick the crap out of callbacks? I mean, you've got the whole thing in one single scope, which is just awesome. Like, it's so much less code, so much code that you don't have to write, because you can modify parameters coming in, modify the return value going out. Have a happy day. All right, so this stuff is all great and awesome, right? But what's like the catch? Well, it's not done yet. We haven't finished. There's a lot of basic stuff that's still missing, like authentication, ACL, helpers, model associations. So it's like really basic stuff, and it's not quite usable. The structure is in place, and we're developing it really rapidly. But this isn't a place we've never been before, right? Like helpers, we have helpers, they exist. Really, the kind of issue that we're facing right now is we're just trying to find the best approach to do everything and how we play with all this new power safely. Because, yeah, power and responsibility, that whole kind of vaccine thing. Yeah, it's 5 minutes, right? So yeah, that's our show. You don't have to go home. Wait, you can stay here, it's okay. Questions? Otherwise, yeah, I can jump in and start showing more stuff and kind of how it works. Yes? When? Well, that's a good question. Actually, all the code and stuff that's in there right now, including Slice, is going to be made available later today. That's a happy thing. Like when it's going to be done. When it's going to be done, I don't know. I mean, we're all working on it really hard, right? And we'll see. It's, we've got to plan timelines and other versions and stuff, so.
It's going to be a problem. Can you just say a little bit about testing?
Testing? What about it?
Well, just the fact
Oh, the fact that all the classes have been re-engineered for happy testing goodness. That?
That.
Yeah.
And the fact that we've been working on a very simplified test suite that'll handle most of our use cases.
Yeah. So,
every class right now, it has all the coverage.
yeah, so there are actually still some classes in here that aren't test covered. They're like simple classes, and we'll get to them. But of the classes that are covered, most of them actually have pretty high coverage. A lot of them are at 100%. We actually wrote our own, like, very minimal test suite to do this, using some new 5.3 features that allow us to, say, run test coverage a lot faster than was previously possible with this filter system. So the test suite that we have is already mostly API compatible with PHP unit. So in the case of writing most of your tests, the idea is that any generated tests or any tests that use our normal API that you use, you should be able to stop using that, drop PHP unit into your app, and just keep going with that once you hit that point. Felix, did you have a question?
No.
Did I just answer it?
Oh, maybe. Why are we not considering PHP unit?
Well, besides the intellectual property issues, we just wanted something really simple to get started, and we wanted to be able to leverage the features in the core to test the core. And there were various other reasons, but
the simplest thing is
right.
dependency. Right now, there's a barrier to entry in testing because you have to go download simple.
Right, and
while it seems like a very superficial barrier, it exists.
Right, and it's actually kind of a more mental barrier than people tend to think. So we really want everything to be in there in order for testing to just be ready to go right from the start.
We've managed to test everything that's in there so far without PHP in it, and it runs fast, it runs well, and most of the things have incredibly high code coverage. And the way that the tests are actually run, the code coverage is actually extremely accurate.
Yeah, so actually right now, that's a very good point. Right now the code coverage, because we can't wrap it really tightly around the assertions that are being executed, it's actually covering a lot of stuff that's not really being run as part of the test itself. It's just kind of extras that get hit in the course of processing the test files. So using the system, we've been able to really narrow down and refine the accuracy of how code coverage is measured. So you can actually test the direct coverage that your tests are creating in your application files. And there are actually settings in there where you can switch it back to see kind of like the full integration coverage to make yourself feel better. But yeah, so that was kind of one of the reasons. Anybody else? Anybody? Yes, Dennis.
An upgrade path?
An upgrade path is actually being worked on. Again, I want to stress that, like, well, everything has kind of been gutted and redone. A lot of like the method names and so on and so forth are actually basically the same. So really, you're just going from, instead of from $this post find, it's just going to be post : find. A lot of the syntax will be really changing and almost superficial, but just ways to clean it up, basically. Also, we've looked at a lot of avenues of approach. For that, Garrett, do you want to say something?
No, I mean, yeah, eventually there's an upgrade path, but eventually there's a release. It's just one of those things.
Right.
It's time.
Yeah.
It's just time.
So 2.0, as we continue to develop it, will most likely kind of become that upgrade path. But even barring that, there are ways, like for example, since we're using namespaces, you could actually run the entire current 1x core like in a plugin and kind of replace things iteratively. Also, one of the major parts of the framework is reflection API that builds off the native PHP reflection API.
Yeah, one of those first things was about documentation, not enough or too much documentation.
Yeah, that was a joke.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what about?
So yeah, we have a lot of classes in the core that provide introspection for doc logs for code itself, and we're working on some code for actually very sophisticated token parsing. So the token parsing feature is particularly important because it can actually parse through your code and figure out in context what $post find means, and actually automatically translate that to post : find, and drop in the use statement to import the class inside of your controller. So it's definitely been thought about, and we're kind of thinking about it and figuring out how to attack it from multiple angles. But there isn't right now, I mean, because we're not even done with the thing yet, but there certainly will be.
But that's also why we feel like 2.0 is an important step for us to make too, because we can slowly upgrade to 2.0. We can move to PHP 5 only. We can keep stepping on up, right? And that's really the upgrade path.
Right, because with 2.0 coming out, you still really buy a lot of efficiencies just in terms of like making your code just run faster. And it exists, and it's fully functional, which is nice. So yeah, that's kind of the thought there. Anybody else? Wow, no questions, like all this new stuff. Yes, Pierre?
What's the current advancement in the PHP standards group? I mean, like,
what's the current advancement?
Yeah, you just talk about conventions, but are there something that are final decisions?
Everything is in a little bit of flux right now in terms of the
There's two pseudo standards though right now. Essentially. As far as path naming and class naming. Right?
Not really. Basically, one of them, there's kind of like, here's the best practices way to name stuff, and here's kind of the alternative backwards compatible way to name stuff, which is, for all practical purposes, kind of like deprecated. It doesn't mean much as far as the various framework and library communities are concerned, because like Zen Framework and Pair2, for example, are basically committed to implementing this, regardless of whatever else happens.
But what is this?
This naming standard.
Right.
Oh, right, so you want to actually know what the naming standard is, sorry. Basically, the naming standard is really simple, and it boils down to kind of three, I guess, non-negotiable things, which is, so namespace class names map directly to file paths, given a specific base path. Namespaces are always lowercase and underscored, and class names are always count case. What's that?
So it will be compatible with CakePHP stuff?
Yeah,
Okay.
so yeah, the new core is already compatible.
And the other frameworks are starting to move to that convention too.
I'm sorry? Yes, Pair2 I think is already there. Matthew Weir-Finney, who's the lead developer of the Zen framework, is a pretty strong supporter of it as well. Has committed support in a future version. I don't know when that's happening. It's whenever they release a major version that goes to 5.3. Yeah. So also Solar PHP and the Gavi framework. So Solar is interesting because it actually has a lot of really useful classes. Like it doesn't offer the kind of efficient full stack benefits. Like you have to write a little bit more code to do things. But it has a lot of really well written classes that you can take and drop right into your Cake applications. Anybody else? Yes, Dennis.
Could you clarify which version is going to be available next? Like,
sure. 1.3 is 99% sure going to be available next. Is that all right?
The goal is actually to make 1.3, and I mentioned this in the last case, but the goal is to make 1.3 and 2.0 available simultaneously, and that's why there's a lot of effort being put into merging those changes together right now. Main difference there being, PHP 4 versus PHP 5.
so you can just skip 1.3 if you don't have to.
That's right. If you don't have the PHP 4 requirement, you can skip 1.3 altogether, and just move right up to 2.0.
Right. So
And like we talked, like Nate said, there's no definitive timeline for any of these real versions, but the effort right now is being made on getting 2.0 there. Cake 3 is much further from that point, because 2.0 obviously builds a lot more on what we've already got.
That's what I want to know, right?
Yeah.
So now for 2.0.
Yeah, so there's a lot of people working on 2.0 right now. A lot of people, there's a few people working on Cake 3, and
right. So we've been able to expand the team to kind of accommodate this parallel development, and it's been interesting to see some of the efficiencies that have come out of that. But yeah, as Garrett mentioned yesterday, 2.0 and 1.3 are going to be basically API compatible. So it's really just kind of to wrap up the features that we were working on the 1x branch, roll them into 2.0, and just put them both out. Anything else? All right. So if you want, I can jump into showing a couple more features. Anybody be interested in seeing that? Okay.
how much time?
Let's find out here.
Should be.
We're technically right on the spot here.
let's give it 5 minutes.
Okay.
I'm for giving it 5 minutes. All right. So I mentioned that switchboard file. This is actually it. You will find it in the config directory. Let me bring this down here. Okay. So yeah, this is the switchboard. It has kind of a little bit of documentation on how the filter system works and a couple of filters that it applies. This one is interesting too because it references the environment class, which is kind of replaced, or the environment class, which is replacing the configure class. So instead of having settings for debug 0, 1, 2, you actually have, different environments that you're switching between. And what this is doing is it's actually pulling out the request object, which is another new thing. So the dispatcher actually instantiates a request object that contains all the data and so forth from the HTTP request that's coming in. Or you can instantiate one manually, like a custom class, and pass it to the dispatcher. So this is actually taking the dispatcher and passing it off to the set method of the environment class so that the environment can take it and figure out what environment we're in. And that's actually kind of a fun one because you can generalize that a little bit, but overall it's kind of hard to figure out without mucking with your server or something absolutely definitively whether or not you are in development, test, or production. So environment, actually we'll look at the test here. So by default, it's going to say, okay, if your server address is something local, like ::1 or 127.0.0.1 or whatever, then we're going to assume that we're in development. Or if the host contains the word test anywhere. I'm sorry? A little bigger, sure.
Can you change to, I think white might be. It's hard to read the green on black.
Okay. By you. So is it hard to read the green on black in the back there?
Yeah.
Okay. Let's find a different thing then. Oh, it's better.
Yeah.
How's that? Great. So yeah, it's pretty simplistic, but one of the benefits of this closure system is that you can actually so the is method is what you query to figure out what environment you're actually in. But if you need some custom way to specify how your environment configuration happens, you can call that is method and actually pass it in a closure that says if we're localhost, then we're in development, otherwise we're production, and that's it. So you actually get that request object instance, and you can query that for whatever you need to figure out what your environment is based on your application's configuration. So it's all completely customizable, which is pretty cool. And the validator class, again, got all kinds of validations. These can be wired up completely custom. And validators also have filters of a slightly different kind. So we'll take a look at one here. Email. Right, so there's two basic kinds of email checking that the current CakePHP core allows. The first is simple irregular expression checking to see if this might be a valid email address, if it matches the format. And then it also allows you to specify whether or not you want to do deep checking, which actually does a host lookup on the domain name of the email. Let's stop that. So that extra deep checking is actually done using a post filter that happens on validations, and you can hook in your own custom filters using the filter method of the validator class. So that just intercepts any successful validations and says, okay, or we figured out that, well, this looks like a valid email address, so we'll get the host and we'll do a lookup. And then return the value based on that. So, I'm trying to think what else I can show you here. Joelle, any suggestions? What's that? Thumbs up? Oh, I didn't get to the media class. I'm just really good. I promise.
I think one of the other things to do with this is that there's a somewhat stricter sense of the coding standards.
Right, the coding standards, everything is actually very neat, I'd say. And like those introspection tools that I mentioned, will actually be going towards tools similar to what we have now, but a bit more comprehensive, that will actually be able to measure in a very in-depth way how well covered these classes and methods are in terms of documentation. So that should help. But the media class is interesting because it's a slight modification of the relationship between the controller and the view. So right now, how many people do like JSON or XML in their applications? Just a quick show of hands. Okay, so yeah, most people, right? So it's kind of annoying when you have to go create like an extra JSON view or XML view for everything all the time, even though it's basically the same thing. So the media class allows you to actually wire up default handlers for different media types. And so we can say, well, the default is we want to use this, this view class, which is the default view class. We'll look for templates here, and we'll look for layouts here. And then for HTML, we just want to basically inherit the default. And for JSON, we don't really need a view, we don't really need a layout. We just want to be able to encode and decode. So this media class can actually be used anywhere in the framework where you need to encode or decode content of a certain type. Any questions? Good, because we're out of time anyway. Thank you.